A song so hated by its own band that it literally tore one of the biggest rock groups of the 70s and 80s into pieces. A #3 Billboard smash that fans screamed at, bandmates refused to play, and the lead singer now says cost him everything: his health, his friendships, and his place in the group he started as a teenager. Dennis DeYoung has spent decades smiling through the pain, but in the last couple of years he finally stopped holding back. And what he's revealed about why he was really forced out of Styx is way darker than the simple "we hated Mr. Roboto" story everyone thinks they know. Stay with me because the truth starts way before that robot mask ever hit the stage, and it's still burning today. Back in the summer of 1972, on the south side of Chicago, a skinny kid named Dennis DeYoung was already dreaming bigger than anyone around him. He had gathered his neighbors, twin brothers John and Chuck Panazzo, and together they turned a basement accordion band into something called Styx, named after the mythical river of the underworld, because it sounded cool and nobody else was using it. Dennis wrote the songs, sang the high notes, and played keyboards like his life depended on it, because in a way, it did. By the time they signed with Wooden Nickel Records, he had already penned the haunting ballad Lady, a slow burner that took 2 years to explode to #6 on the charts and put Styx on the national map. Suddenly, every radio station in America wanted more. Dennis delivered. Come Sail Away, Fooling Yourself, Renegade, all his. 7 of the band's 8 top 10 singles came straight from his pen and his voice. Styx went from opening act to headliner, filling arenas with lights and scarves and laser beams, while Dennis stood center stage in flowing robes like some rock and roll wizard. To the outside world, everything looked golden. 4 platinum albums in a row, sold-out tours, magazine covers. But inside the tour bus, tiny cracks were already forming. Dennis loved Broadway, loved concept albums, loved pushing the music into places most rock bands never dared to go. The rest of the guys, they just wanted to crank the guitars and feel the crowd roar. Nobody realized yet that those 2 visions couldn't live in the same band forever. But something was coming that would force everyone to pick a side. And it started with a whisper from the religious right that rock music itself was evil. By the late 70s, Styx was untouchable, but the lineup that made them giants also planted the seeds of war. In 1975, a scrappy guitarist from Alabama named Tommy Shaw walked in with a song called Crystal Ball and instantly shifted the balance. Tommy could write killer riffs, sing like an angel, and looked like every girl's backstage fantasy. Then there was James J.Y. Young, the rhythm guitarist who had been there since the early days and always leaned harder, louder, more straight-ahead rock. Suddenly, the band had 3 strong voices pulling in 3 different directions. Dennis wanted epics, 7-minute stories with tempo changes and orchestral keyboards. Tommy wanted tight, radio-friendly rockers. JY wanted to crank the amps until ears bled. On stage, it worked like magic. Off stage, the arguments got louder every album. Dennis pushed for more ballads and theatrical touches. The others rolled their eyes when he brought in string sections or talked about turning albums into full-blown rock operas. The fans ate it all up anyway. Paradise Theater went triple platinum and hit #1 in 1981, but the victory felt fragile. Then the outside world threw gasoline on the fire. Evangelical preachers started pointing fingers at Styx, claiming songs like Snowblind had secret satanic messages when played backwards. Congressional hearings were happening, albums were getting warning stickers, and Dennis, a devout Catholic who still went to Mass every Sunday, took it personally. He decided the next record wouldn't just be another collection of hits, it would be a full-scale counterattack against censorship, a futuristic rock opera where rock and roll itself was outlawed by a moral majority. Most of the band thought he was out of his mind. Tommy laughed and said, "We're a rock band, not Broadway." But Dennis had the track record, the label's ear, and the final say. So in 1982, they walked into the studio to make Kilroy Was Here, and nothing would ever be the same again. And the first thing Dennis did when they got there was hand them a song about a robot that nobody asked for.
The idea hit Dennis in Japan, of all places. It was 1981. Styx were playing stadiums in Tokyo, and everywhere he looked, people were bowing and saying, "Domo arigato." One night, he was watching a news report about automation taking over factories, robots replacing human workers, and something clicked. What if the same thing happened to music? What if the same people burning records today decided tomorrow that guitars and drums were dangerous too? He scribbled the phrase, "Domo arigato, Mr. Roboto," on a hotel napkin and laughed out loud. It was ridiculous. It was perfect. Back home, the rumors about Styx got uglier. Preachers told congregations that if you played Snowblind backwards, you could hear "Satan, yes, Satan." Teenagers were supposedly forming cults because of "Come Sail Away." The PMRC was forming, Tipper Gore was on television, and Dennis felt like rock itself was on trial. So Kilroy Was Here became his courtroom defense, a full concept album set in a future where a group called the Majority for Musical Morality has outlawed rock concerts and replaced live musicians with harmless robots. The hero, Robert Kilroy, is a rock star thrown in prison for playing guitar. He escapes by disguising himself as one of the very robots that replaced him. The band listened to the early demos and felt the floor drop out. Keyboards everywhere, vocoders, theatrical dialogue between songs, and right in the middle, a bouncy synth-pop track called Mr. Roboto that sounded nothing like the Styx that had just sold 10 million copies of Paradise Theater. Tommy Shaw hated it on first listen. JY called it a Broadway tune wearing a Styx t-shirt. Even the Pinozzo brothers, who usually stayed quiet, asked if they were making a record or a play. Dennis wouldn't budge. He told A&M Records it was the future of the band. They believed him because he had never been wrong before. They spent a fortune building the Kilroy stage show before a single note was recorded. 10-foot robot props, prison bars that rose from the floor, filmed segments where actors playing the bad guys banned rock music. The band rehearsed in costume for weeks. Tommy wore a robot mask that weighed 15 pounds and steamed up so bad he could barely breathe. Every night, Dennis promised them the fans would understand the message once they saw the whole vision. They were wrong. Dead wrong. And opening night in 1983 would prove it in the most brutal way possible.
March 1983, Kilroy Was Here drops. Critics are split. Some call it bold. Others call it a bloated mess. Mr. Roboto shoots to number 3 on the Hot 100 anyway. The video is in constant rotation on MTV. Kids are doing the robot dance in the aisles. The album still goes platinum fast, but something feels off. Hardcore Styx fans who loved the guitar fireworks of Grand Illusion hear synths and spoken word interludes and start booing at listening parties. Then the tour begins, and the nightmare goes live. The lights drop. A 10-minute movie plays on giant screen showing rock music being outlawed, and suddenly Dennis walks out, dressed as Kilroy in a silver jumpsuit, singing behind prison bars while Tommy and JY stand frozen in robot costumes, lip-syncing to pre-recorded lines. Half the crowd cheers the spectacle, the other half starts yelling, "Play Renegade," and "Where's the rock and roll?" Beer cups fly. In Detroit, fans chant "bullshit" so loud the band can't hear the click track. In Chicago, their hometown, someone throws a shoe that knocks the head off one of the $1 million robot props. Backstage, it's worse. Tommy Shaw is miserable, tells anyone he'll listen that he feels like a clown in a bad sci-fi play. He begs to drop the skits and just play the old hits. Dennis refuses, says the message is more important than a couple of drunk hecklers. JY starts drinking heavier, muttering that they've become everything they used to make fun of. John Pinozzo is already battling the liver problems that will take him in a few years, and the stress isn't helping. Sales slide. The album stalls at 1 times platinum instead of the expected 4 or 5. Radio stops adding the second single because stations are getting complaints. A&M Records quietly panics. And one night in late 1983, after another show drowned in booze, Tommy Shaw walks into the dressing room, throws his robot mask at the wall, and says the words that start the end. I'm done. I can't do this anymore. He quits on the spot. The Kilroy tour limps on for a few more weeks with a replacement guitarist nobody cares about, then collapses. Styx, the biggest band in America 2 years earlier, is suddenly yesterday's news, and every article blames one thing: the Robot song. But losing Tommy was only the opening act. The real betrayal was still 16 years away, and it would hurt Dennis DeYoung far worse than any flying beer cup ever could.
Tommy Shaw walked out in December 1983, and Styx basically died that night. The remaining shows were canceled, the robot props were sold for scrap, and for the next 6 years, the name Styx felt radioactive. Dennis tried a solo record, Tommy joined Damn Yankees with Ted Nugent and scored another huge hit, and nobody wanted to talk about Kilroy ever again. In interviews, DeYoung started calling the whole thing Dennis's folly. Dennis smiled politely and said the fans just weren't ready for the message. Then, in 1990, something nobody saw coming, Tommy came back. Not for a full reunion at first, just a one-off theater tour without Dennis, but the crowds were insane. The chemistry was still there. By 1995, the classic lineup, minus the late John Panazzo, replaced by Todd Suckerman, was back in the studio cutting new songs for a greatest hits package. In 1996, they played Woodstock 94 to 500,000 people, and in 1997, the new single Show Me the Way became a top 5 smash because of Gulf War news footage. For the first time in over a decade, it looked like the wounds had healed. Dennis was writing again, Tommy was smiling again, the 1999 album Brave New World started taking shape. Fans dared to hope the nightmare was finally over. And then Dennis got sick. It started with a virus, nothing dramatic at first, but it attacked his eyes. Bright stage lights suddenly felt like knives. Doctors called it extreme photophobia. Even normal daylight made him nauseous. He begged the band for 6 months to recover. Tommy and JY said no. They had tours booked, a new album ready to promote, and live shows were 70% of their income. Dennis offered to sing from the side of the stage in sunglasses or pre-record vocals, anything. The answer came back cold. The show can't wait. In May 1999, while Dennis was still housebound with curtains drawn, he received a fax, an actual fax, telling him his services were no longer required. They had already auditioned replacements. 2 weeks later, Lawrence Gowan, a talented Canadian singer who could hit the high notes, was announced as the new voice of Styx. Dennis sat in a dark room reading the press release and realized the band he had founded when he was 17 years old had just fired him for being sick. But the story the public heard was very different. And for 25 years, Dennis has been fighting to set it straight.
For most of the 90s, it actually looked like the hatchet was buried. After Tommy's surprise return in 1990, the band started playing secret club gigs under fake names just to feel the old spark again. The crowds went berserk every time Dennis and Tommy traded harmonies on Fooling Yourself or Come Sail Away. By 1995, the full classic lineup, minus John Panozzo, who was already too ill to tour, was back on arena stages, and the reception was thunderous. Grown men cried during Babe. Teenage kids who weren't alive for Paradise Theater discovered the songs and lost their minds. 1996 brought the Return to Paradise live album and a sold-out tour formed for a concert movie. Dennis and Tommy stood shoulder to shoulder, trading guitar and keyboard solos like the Kilroy disaster had never happened. In interviews, they laughed about the old days, swore the robot thing was water under the bridge, and promised brand new music. The 1997 single Show Me the Way shot to number 3 because CNN kept playing it under footage of soldiers coming home from the Gulf War. Radio loved them again. Fans started calling it the second golden age. In the studio, they started cutting Brave New World. Dennis brought sweeping ballads, Tommy brought crunchy rockers, and for the first time in years, the two styles felt like they were blending instead of fighting. Everyone in the room believed the next album would finally put the ghost of Mr. Roboto to rest for good. Rehearsals were loose and happy. Dennis talked openly about bringing back some theatrical lighting, and this time Tommy just smiled and said, "As long as I don't have to wear the damn robot head." Then, in the fall of 1998, Dennis caught what he thought was just a nasty flu. A week later, he couldn't open the curtains without feeling like someone was stabbing his eyes with ice picks. Doctors ran test after test. Diagnosis?
a rare viral infection that triggered extreme light sensitivity. Stage lights, sunlight, even television screens sent him into agony. He spent days in a pitch-black bedroom, voice still perfect, fingers still itching to play, but physically unable to face the one thing the band needed most, the blinding glare of a world tour. He asked for 6 months, just 6 months to heal. The answer he got back changed everything, and it came faster than anyone expected.
The official line from Tommy and JY in 1999 was simple. Creative differences. Safe, clean, boring. Behind the scenes, it was brutal. Dennis says he got a phone call from the band's manager telling him, "They're moving forward without you. No visit, no get well card, no let's talk when you're better, just a fax and a press release that made it sound like Dennis had quit to do musical theater." Overnight, radio hosts were repeating the story that Dennis had become impossible to work with, that he wanted Styx to be Phantom of the Opera with guitars, while the rest wanted to rock. Dennis sued. He didn't want money. He wanted the truth and the right to use the name he'd created. The lawsuit dragged for 2 years. Discovery turned up emails where band members called him a cancer and joked about finally being free of the dictator. In court papers, Dennis revealed he had been ready to tour with dark goggles and a modified light rig, but the others refused even a single postponed date. The case settled in 2001. Tommy and JY kept the name Styx forever. Dennis kept the right to perform the song solo under Dennis DeYoung, the music of Styx, and both sides signed gag orders about the details. For the next 2 decades, Styx rebuilt a huge touring career, sometimes 90 shows a year, but they erased Dennis almost completely. For years, they refused to play Come Sail Away, Babe, or The Best of Times live. Mr. Roboto banned entirely from 1983 until 2018. When fans screamed for the old hits, Tommy would shrug and say, "We don't do his songs anymore." Fans split into armed camps online. Team Tommy versus Team Dennis, death threats, doxing, the works. Dennis watched from the sidelines while his own songs, the ones that made the band famous, were treated like embarrassing ex-girlfriends. He toured theaters with a 6-piece band, singing every hit note perfect, often outselling Styx in the same cities. Critics started calling the Shaw Young version Styx Light, or the cover band with the legal rights. And every year, the question got louder. Why won't they just bury the hatchet? Then slowly, something started to crack on the other side. And the first sign came in the one place they swore it never would. The encore.
Fast forward to the 2020s, and the strangest twist of all starts playing out in front of thousands of fans every single night. After refusing to touch Mr. Roboto for 35 years, Styx suddenly drops it into the encore in 2018. Not as a joke, not as a one-off. It becomes a regular closer. The robot dance is back, the Domo Arigato chant shakes the rafters, and Tommy Shaw, the same guy who once swore he'd rather retire than played again, is out there grinning and doing the stiff-armed moves like nothing ever happened. A year later, they quietly add the best of times. By 2024, Come Sail Away is back too. Songs they spent 2 decades pretending weren't theirs are suddenly the emotional peak of the show. Fans notice. Dennis definitely notices. He starts dropping little truth bombs in interviews. Funny how the songs they said ruined the band are now saving their set list. On Facebook, he posts side-by-side clips. His own band nailing Babe in a packed theater versus Styx struggling to hit the same notes with a replacement singer, and just lets the footage speak. The comments explode. He never swears, never screams, just lets the music and the receipts do the talking. When a reporter asks Tommy about Bad Blood in 2024, Tommy sighs and says, "We've all let go of the resentment." Then immediately adds, "Dennis writes great songs." Within hours, Dennis reposts it with a single raised eyebrow emoji and the words, "Would have been nice to hear that in 1999 when I still had a job." The fan war has cooled into something sadder. Exhaustion. Most people just want one more tour with everyone on stage together before it's too late. Chuck Panozzo has cancer, Tommy's voice is starting to thin, Dennis is 77 and still singing every note like 1977.
Rumors swirl every year. Secret talks, back-channel offers, a possible one-off for the 50th anniversary in 2027, but every time someone gets close, the old wound reopen. Dennis says he's open if they ask properly. Tommy and JY say they're happy as is. Nobody picks up the phone. So, the robot keeps marching. 2 versions of Styx tour the continent at the same time, playing the same songs to different crowds, collecting separate checks, telling separate stories about what really happened. One side calls it survival, the other side calls it betrayal wearing a happier mask. And every night, somewhere in America, a 70-something man in a darkened theater hits the opening chords of Come Sail Away. 60 miles away, another band hits the exact same chords under brighter lights, and for 3 minutes, the audience forgets there are 2 bands at all. Maybe that's the real curse of Mr. Roboto. It never actually killed Styx. It just taught them how to live forever apart. What do you think? Could one song, one conversation, one night ever put it all back together? Or is some damage just too deep to forgive? Let me know in the comments. And if you ever wondered which side of the story is really yours, maybe it's time to pick a show and go hear it for yourself.
So here we are, more than 40 years after a silly little phrase, domo arigato, Mr. Roboto, accidentally became the line in the sand that no one has managed to erase. Dennis DeYoung built Styx from a Chicago basement, wrote the songs that turned them into legends, and then watched his own band lock him out while he was too sick to fight back. For 2 decades, they acted like those hits belonged to someone else. Now, they close every show with the same songs they once swore destroyed them, while Dennis, across town, sings them like the wound is still fresh. There's no tidy Hollywood ending here, no tearful reunion at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. They still haven't even been nominated. Just 2 touring machines keeping the music alive in parallel universes, proving that sometimes the biggest casualties of rock and roll aren't the bands that break up, they're the ones that never really forgive. One robot song didn't kill Styx. It just showed that even platinum-selling brothers can turn into strangers when pride, money, and spotlights get in the way. If this story hit you the way it still hits Dennis every single night he steps on stage without his old friends, do me a favor. Hit that like button, drop your thoughts below. Team Dennis, Team Tommy, or just heartbroken for both. And subscribe to Retro Celeb Talk so you never miss the next time we pull back the curtain on the rock wars that changed everything. Because some feuds never die. They just learn to play the hits without each other. See you in the next one.